Hello and welcome to When Football Began Again, the podcast that takes a nostalgic look at the Premier League era. Today's show is a best bits compilation, some of my favourite guests and moments from Series 1 of the show. Series 2 will be launching very, very soon, and I have some amazing guests lined up for you. But in the meantime, these best bits compilations are just to whet your appetite and maybe catch up on the bits you've forgotten about or episodes you may have missed in Series 1. First up, I've got Josh Pugh talking about coaching junior football. Then it's author Rob Fletcher telling me all about why Liverpool versus Arsenal in 1989, predating the Premier League by 3 years, is such an important game in the development of football in this country on TV. Ian McMillan talks about being rescued from a desert island by Jan Aage Fjortoft. We discuss the Premier League's greatest Algerian of all time, and then, in a completely unrelated topic, talk to Ashley Ward about what it's like to have Riyad Mahrez as a son-in-law. There's the story of the West Ham fan who, in the pre-season of 94-95, was plucked from the stands by West Ham manager Harry Redknapp, and then went on to score on his debut. There's the worst goalkeeper in all of Blackpool and a round of Play Your Apps Right with a Barnsley flavour. And the final word goes to Brian Dean, scorer of the first Premier League goal, sort of hitting on my wife. All of that in store. If you enjoy the show, subscribe, share, leave us a review. I really appreciate it. Let everyone you know about the show. It's coming back at the beginning of September 2023. With some amazing guests. So please make sure you subscribe in and get your friends to do so as well. But here we go. Some more best bits. Part 2 of When Football Began Again. Enjoy. You were responsible for a very funny Twitter account and subsequent book I think you published during the pandemic called Grassroots Coach. Now, my son plays junior football. Your book, your Twitter account was excruciatingly accurate. I mean, how did you, without having a child kind of in, or is it like a younger sibling? How did you get that so on point?
I used to coach. I used to run a kids team. I got Adam from like under sixes to like they went to I left them when they were at 9 aside. I started doing comedy then actually, and I had to give my weekends up. But I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved the other coaches. I loved that they had their initials for some reason on everything. Why did we need initials on stuff? We know what your name is. It's and I'd love the parents. I remember we had like a taster session where you just bring the kids and it's like, if you enjoy it, you can join the team and come training. And one of the dads came up to me and described his son as a workhorse. And I thought, I want a bit of this. I love this world. But you know what? It's actually a lovely side to it. You know, when you see like the parents, they're so proud when their kid runs through. It just opens up, the grass opens up for them, and the kids run through with the ball. What a feeling! That's incredible, and I don't begrudge. It's all done with love, people. It's just amazing. It's just a great thing, and it's wicked. But there's some absolute nutters involved.
Yeah, I mean, it is an incredible world for anyone who either is just getting into grassroots football. There's a brilliant book Jim White wrote, You'll Win Nothing with Kids, and he actually talks in that book about how he was basically a reporter for Man United, and he was literally going to a press conference with Fergie about a huge game, but all he could think about was the match that he was managing, the junior football match, and literally asks Fergie for advice on what he would do with a certain type of player. It's brilliant, but it's all consuming, I think, isn't it, for the people who do give up their time,
Yeah.
So yeah.
So one of the tweets was born out of real thing. So there was one of the coaches, a friend of the team, he kept phoning the parents on his break at work to like kind of give them information and stuff. But he worked nights. And he was leaving voicemails with people at like 3 or 4 in the morning about the weekends. It's unbelievable. And it is all consuming. I remember when I did one of the courses you have to do. People are wearing I think it was like a first aid course or something. And people they're there in their club's tracksuit. I'm like, we're not even Why are you in the gear now? Just wear your own clothes. And like the phone, like on the break, they're like phoning to say how we're getting all this advice about child welfare and stuff. And then on the break during the course, they're phoning up saying the way they're talking about the kids, it's just it's amazing. But so many people give up the time, and it's great. It's an amazing thing to be part of. And the kids ain't bothered. This is the great thing. Your kid could get beat 6-0. And if they're going to McDonald's after, or they've got to go to someone's party after, they're all mates and they love it. And it's great.
Yeah, that's all that matters. Absolutely. Yeah. The sixth match we'd like to take with you is any game from before the Premier League era that you'd go back and watch over and over. So what have you gone for?
So I went for a match that I've only ever seen highlights of. I've read the book 89. Which is about this as well. And it's Liverpool 0, Arsenal 2. Because I just think there's so much drama and such an amazing story linked to that game. I'm reading the book 89 as well, and hearing what the players thought of it. It's just amazing that it went to the title went to the last game of the season, and the two teams that were going for the title were playing each other. Liverpool were the most dominant team English football's ever seen over that period of time, at home and in Europe. Arsenal were a really, really good side. George Graham made a really good team in there, and they were looking to obviously get back to winning titles. And the fact, the way it happens, the way the goals happen, just that thrill of the actual game. And Liverpool fans thinking it's a home game, Anfield, we're so strong there. We're going to beat Arsenal or get a draw. We'll win the league, another league title. That's going to be amazing. But being a Liverpool fan, I live in Liverpool now, and I can imagine what that must have been like at 1-0. And then thinking, oh my God, they've scored again. Like, what do you do? What do you do as a fan? I think that drama, that narrative, that story is what you eventually start loving about football. I just think the story around that, you can just watch it again and again.
And of course, famously, that game was on terrestrial TV, and this match is pointed to sometimes as, this is maybe what we lost with the Sky years, that actually football moving behind effectively a paywall meant that the average fan didn't get to see that. And that's obviously a very, very fair point. I think the flip side is Jim Rosenthal, who was involved in that broadcast, admits that within 10 minutes of that game finishing, they had to cross over to the news at 10. So it's that kind of contrast that you talked about before, isn't it? Of Sky offering that kind of blanket coverage. We are going to come on air like FA Cup final days, the only comparison with terrestrial TV. We're going to come on air an hour before and we're going to stay on air an hour after. So what do you make to that kind of balance of that being a moment that so many experienced on ITV, Brian Moore's famous commentary, with the fact that perhaps now that maybe doesn't happen? Let's say the Aguero moment for Manchester City probably was only experienced by a fraction of the fans that saw Michael Thomas's goal in 89.
Yeah, I suppose that's the thing that the Premier League has taken away from a regular fan or a fan that might be coming into football for the first time, that not all football will be available to you to watch. Like, we grew up with Match of the Day, you had Football Italia, and you had the Champions League every week on ITV. So you could still see some Premier League players, but you could see a load of players from around Europe, which connected you with that world game. I think what's changed, or what could have been changed, I can't see it changing now, but just giving maybe the terrestrial TV channels maybe 10 games a season. Because often I think in the 70s and 80s, that's all they were showing live. They were only showing 10 to 15, maybe 20 games a season. If they could have reached a deal to sort of show that amount of games, maybe we'd be in a different place. And really, it wasn't going to harm the product, because you probably would have got more people subscribing to Sky Sports on the back of watching that. But also, it wouldn't be a clincher for someone who's undecided about what they want for their subscription. So that is a tricky one. I think losing the Champions League from terrestrial TV, I think that was pretty tough as well, because at least you had that one thing that you could watch with Brian Moore, with Clive Tilsley, learn about all these players. I think that's lost a little bit of its allure, I suppose, now, especially because a lot of the teams are the same. But there's never going to be a right answer. because the terrestrial TV channels, as you say, didn't put football as the main product. It was a byproduct of what was popular at the time, really.
Yeah. And of course, Michael Thomas, who goes on to play for Liverpool remarkably, really. I mean, that's incredible. So you're on your deserted island. You've got your 5 matches. We're going to give you the opportunity to choose a Premier League player, either current or ex-Premier League player, who you would choose to attempt a rescue mission. But do be warned, because if this rescue mission fails, you have got to see out your days on the island with this player. Who would you choose?
And is this a Barnsley player or any Premier League player?
It can be a Barnsley player. It can be any player from the Premier League history. It's up to you.
Just because he was an interesting chap intellectually and he's a Barnsley player, I think I would choose Jan Aage Fjortoft. Partly because of that odd skill he showed when he ran and tackled that bloke who was going to attack Gary Willard. Partly because when I've interviewed him a couple of times, he seemed like a man with a kind of hinterland, an intellectual hinterland. You know, he's felt like a fella that wouldn't just want to talk about football when he's stuck on this desert island. And also, what I was always impressed by, he had massive, broad shoulders. So I think he'd say, after about 3 months on this desert island, when we talked about philosophy and poetry and art, he'd go, do you know, Ian, I think, because I've got these broad shoulders, I could swim you, we could swim away. And I go, you think so, Jan Aage? And he'd go, yeah, I think we could, look at my shoulders. They're like swimmers' shoulders. You go, all right, Jan Aage, point of information, I can't swim. And he'd go, it don't matter, look at these shoulders. So then, me and Jan Aage, looking by now emaciated, but knowing so much about philosophy and art, he'd then trust me, he'd say, Ian, trust me. And I'd say, I trust you, Jan Aage, and your massive shoulders. And I'd get on his back, and he'd start swimming, because he had big shoulders. And I'd be on his back, and he'd be like a boat, and I'd be on his back, and I'd be going, remember that that you ran on the pitch and tackled that bloke? And he'd go, Ian, don't distract me. Don't distract me. I'm swimming. Then ahead of us, we'd see, like some kind of miracle, one of those massive cruise ships, big cruise ship. And we go, oh, there's a cruise ship there, Ian. And we get on the cruise ship. There'd be joy because I've been rescued. But then they go, oh, Jan Aage, you might want to go down and watch this talk. There's a talk, one of them cruise ship talks. And in the cruise ship, in one of these theatres, there's Danny Wilson doing a talk about our year in the Premier League. And I go, please welcome Jan Aage Fjortoft. And Jan Aage dripping wet, covered in lard, because that helps him to swim with his massive shoulders. Yes, I think I'd choose Jan Aage.
I mean, let's just hope that Gary Willard and family aren't on a cruise.
Oh, that'd be great. They were on a cruise. And he'd go, no, it never happened like that.
We've covered this a little bit. We're doing them alphabetically. Today is the turn of Algeria. Now, there have been 18 Algerians on the books of Premier League sides during the last 30 years. There is one standout, admittedly, but you may be able to make a case for one of the other shortlisted players. I'll give you the 4 that we will put out, and we'll put this out on Twitter for people to vote for their favourite Algerian player of all time. Here is the shortlist. So we start off with Ali Benarbia, Manchester City's cultured midfielder, signed from Paris Saint-Germain and scored in 3 times and assisted in 6 in the 2002-2003 season. His final game in a City shirt was against Barcelona in a friendly to mark the opening of the Etihad Stadium. Saïd Benrahma, the skillful West Ham United attacker who'd scored 9 goals in 62 appearances by the start of the 22-23 season. He's probably added a few more to that total by the time this goes out as well. Islam Slimani, the striker Leicester City brought in ahead of their maiden Champions League campaign. He only scored 8 goals in 40 appearances for the Foxes before a goalless loan spell at Newcastle, but he is Algeria's all-time top scorer and second most capped player with a more impressive 41 goals in 88 caps. Or is it, I try and say as neutrally as I can, Riyad Mahrez, the 4-time Premier League winner who joined Leicester City for £450,000 in January 2014 when they were still in the Championship and became a Premier League winner just 2 years later. He came 7th in the Ballon d'Or in 2016 and then became the most expensive African player in the world with a £60 million move to Manchester City, where he's added a further 3 League winners' medals to his mantelpiece, scoring 77 times in 258 Premier League appearances before the start of 22-23. So there are 4 players there. Let's start with you, Rich. Who do you think is the greatest Algerian to grace the Premier League?
there's no Hamid Bouatza who actually played for Swindon, so that's the first one. And yeah, I can't hear Mehdi Karouche, former Swindon lower league, and maybe Sophie Zaboub was French Algerian. So this is a difficult one for me. We all know who should win it, but I'm going Benarbia because he was part of that Monaco side in the mid-90s that used to annoy teams like Manchester United in the Champions League. I remember him having that sort of 6-month or year spell where he seemed like a world beater, but he was an aging footballer in the top flight. So my vote is firmly with Ali Benarbia.
What about you, Joe?
It's a no-brainer. Come on, I'm going to go for the obvious one. It's got to be Riyad Mahrez because this is one that I'll remember from. I used to go to Leicester on the regular. I follow. I'm not very much drawing a line. I'm not one of these people who has, several more clubs than a golfer.
Do you have a Leicester shirt, Joe?
I own a shirt. Owning a shirt is not the same as saying I am a fan. Mahrez is someone I remember coming through, and just in terms of legacy, what he's gone on to do is quite remarkable. So you'd have to be the nod for me.
Okay, well, we've got two cases there for a Premier League all-time great and a Manchester City cult hero. Yeah, and I believe you've got a famous footballing son-in-law as well. Do you and Riyad have a chat shop over the match at kind of family get-togethers, or is kind of football off the conversation list?
Oh no, all the time. Yeah. I love talking football. Right? He's a guy who really loves his football as well. I mean, he literally would play on the street. He blooming does when he's not. He will kick a ball around straight after training. Train all day and then just loves his football. So yeah, I love talking about football with. It's give me a new lease of life actually, and. I'm a City fan as a childhood City fan. I was at the Ricardo Villa Cup final in must be about 81 or something. Would it be something like that? 81. Mm-hmm. So always been a City fan, and now it's just a real treat to go and watch Riyad and the team like that.
Wow.
Over the last few years, I would say over the last 4 or 5 years as a whole, definitely the best team in the world in terms of style of football and to go and watch it's just brilliant, and then to have Riyad part of it, and hear a few inside stories is great for me. Yeah,
I mean, if there's ever a way to get in with your father-in-law, it's become one of the best players at the title-winning side he supports. That's incredible work from Riyad Mahrez.
we do every now and again watch the on YouTube. I don't know if you've ever seen it. There's like a split. There's like a split screen from the documentary that Neil Warnock made, and with Pep. He loves that.
Yeah, incredible that you can swap stories about Neil Warnock and Pep Guardiola over the dinner table. It's amazing.
Fantastic.
In this third season of the Premier League era, the sack race is well and truly underway. After just one change of manager all season in 92-93, the teams at the bottom of the table in particular become more accustomed to changing their managers in the seasons that follow. West Ham assistant manager Harry Redknapp replaces Billy Bonds at the beginning of the season and guides them to a solid, if unspectacular, 14th in his first season in charge. There's a wonderful story in pre-season, the week before Harry's actually promoted to the top job, though, when West Ham play Oxford City, where he'd been assistant to Bobby Moore in the 80s. There's a lifelong West Ham fan called Steve Davies who's giving Lee Chapman stick throughout the first half, calling him a donkey, that kind of thing. Harry asks him if he can play as good as he can talk. Redknapp takes him down the tunnel at half-time, sizes him up for kit and boots, and he replaces Lee Chapman for the second half, despite never playing higher than Sunday League. When the announcer asks Redknapp who the new signing is, he replies, "Haven't you been watching the World Cup? It's the great Bulgarian, Titishev." Davies himself said, "I thought I might get a minute or two as a joke. I was trying to stay calm. I got a few touches, but this wasn't park football. After the first 5 minutes, my legs were shaking. I was running on adrenaline. I was playing for West Ham." In the 71st minute, Davies sprints forward, takes an awkward first touch, and in his words, just hits it. The ball whistles low into the bottom corner. It was like time stopped still, said Davis, who was on 30 fags a day at the time and had 2 of them in the first half from the stands. I can testify that Harry Redknapp managing your football club is a lot of fun. Would you have had him at Forest and Ipswich? Fran, what can you imagine Harry Redknapp in the dugout at the City Ground?
Yeah, would it? Yeah, I mean, I could imagine it, and I would totally accept it. During his pomp, and you know, when he was obviously quite a journeyman manager throughout his career and everything. But yeah, I would have totally taken him at Forest. I think he could have done great things there. I think he would have been quite traditional with us as well, knowing our history as a club. But also, like a great term that I like to use for football is a breath of fresh air. Have someone like Harry Redknapp there, it'd be a bit different, a little bit kind of, oh, come on, geezer. And yeah, because he's from Ireland. And,
I thought he was another Barbadian.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He says, I've signed 3 new Barbadian footballers. So I think, I would totally have, at one point, I would have had Redknapp at the City Ground, yeah.
And Tony, for you, and also Ipswich signed Lee Chapman a few months later. Perhaps the scouts got the wrong bloke. Maybe it was this guy that they wanted.
Yeah, Lee Chapman was awful for us as well. Yeah, another awful friend. Harry Redknapp at Ipswich, possibly, as long as he was literally just in charge of coaching and managing, and we changed all the passwords for our accounts and bank accounts and stuff, and didn't they? It's like, Harry, no, you just take the training sessions. No, don't worry about what's in that room over there. Just leave it.
That's why he did all these scouting of Barbadian players, clearly.
Suddenly find out that his dog is now the nominated trustee of our bank account.
The dog's the director of football.
I mean, it must be fun having Harry Redknapp as your manager. You just never know what you're going to get. Do you? Players coming and going, and the fans getting to play by the sound of it. Amazing.
I know. I've heard that story once before, and I thought it was a wind-up. And so you've just confirmed it now, Carl, that actually did happen. I think it's fantastic, isn't it? That is a great story.
It reminds me of that clip of him at training. What was it when he was at West Ham? When he nearly gets hit by the ball.
I'll get hit by the ball, yeah.
He just turns around and rips into that player. You aiming at a fucking goal? You get me, you mug. Whatever he says, I can't remember.
He does get hit by the ball. By the way, this fan, he was tracked down by a journalist a few years later to retell the story because no video footage of this exists, and it was a bit of an urban legend. Apparently, it did happen. The guy actually kind of credits it with he actually started his own courier business that he said did all right. He employed 3 people, paid them quite well. So he actually kind of gives this. It's almost like a life-changing moment of him abusing Lee Chapman, getting dragged onto the pitch and playing for West Ham. So
why has this not been made into a Hollywood film? No, that's great. Feel-good movie of the year.
If you're listening to this podcast 5 years in the future and this is the Brit flick of the year, then this is where it started. We need a credit.
Of course, you have to change it to the Champions League final.
We've got to Hollywood.
Contravening all FIFA and UEFA regulations, you get brought on.
I don't want it to be too glamorous. I want it to be made like a Ken Loach film.
Oh, you want it to be amazing.
There's one reason and one reason alone that we went down that season. Nat Gilks getting injured. That's the sole reason we went down. That's the sole reason. That was it. They all sting. They all sting because they could have all been better. Matt Gilks getting injured was what sent us down. And it's not the lad's fault. There's no footballer in the world who wants to break his leg. But, that's what did it. If we'd had him, we'd have stayed up. I genuinely believe that. I genuinely do. And it breaks my heart.
We were actually missing our second choice goalkeeper as well because we had Rahubka, who was actually pretty decent for us. I don't know if he would have made a step up to the Premier League, but he was a pretty good keeper for us for a while.
Chubbs was a great goalkeeper.
No, Rahubka.
Is he still with us in the Prem?
Yeah, he was. Yeah. But he was injured
then
for the whole year.
Fucking hell, were we playing Richard Kingston every week?
Because he was injured. The 2 of them were injured.
Oh, was Chubbs injured? I'd forgotten that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you
So-
what,
so
Richard Kingston, I don't know whether you can put this out. Genuinely, I've never seen a footballer who every time he entered the football pitch, I wondered whether he'd been drinking. Like properly, like not even just like a couple of drams. I'm talking like he was arseholed every single game. What a liability. That man sent us down. There you go. It wasn't. Do you know what? It wasn't Julks breaking his leg. It was Richard Kingston. Richard Kingston solely sent Blackpool down that season. There we go. I'm done now. Thank you. Shall I turn this off?
Well, there's the exclusive that comes out just as the Kingston
Nathan,
fans-
disagree. Go on, I dare you.
He was probably the best third choice goalkeeper about the bottom half of the team. He was a third choice goalkeeper. He weren't supposed to play 10 games. It was madness that he was even playing.
Yeah. And then Julks' injury. I mean, obviously he was clearly a really key player for you in that first part of the season. Which match did Julks get injured? Was that Birmingham?
I can't remember. I think it was before New
Oh.
Year's, was it?
No, I thought it was Birmingham.
I can't remember now. Yeah.
No, I can't either off the top of my head.
We had the entire January transfer window basically to replace him, and we didn't.
Yeah.
Well, there was a point where we were linked with Shay Given.
Yeah.
And we were going to get Shay Given for £500,000. I mean, Christ almighty. No. Let's give Richard Kingston a couple of bottles of Buckfast and see what he does. Fucking hell. I mean, I never, honestly, I mean, I'm no footballer, you know, I can't do it. But I can do it better than he can. He wasn't the worst goalkeeper at Blackpool. He was the worst goalkeeper in Blackpool.
Well, the Kingston family have just switched off.
Good riddance.
They all gathered round. Before we let you go, we're going to have a quick round of Play Your Apps Right. This is a game that we've devised on this programme. We'll start you off with a familiar former player and the number of appearances they've made in the Premier League. I'll then give you another player, and you have to tell me if that player has more or fewer Premier League appearances in a higher or lower format. There are 11 players. Whoever is in charge of the board at the end is the winner. And bear in mind that if you're in charge of the board and you get the final question wrong, you pass the win to your opponent. So, for control of the board, we're starting off with number 1, Neil Redfern. How many Premier League appearances do you think Neil Redfern made? Let's start with you, Pete. Want to take a stab?
89.
Okay. Ian, what would your guess be?
110.
So, control of the board goes to Pete. It's actually 84, so a very, very good guess there. 84 Premier League games for Barnsley, Charlton and Bradford. He scored 14 goals in that time. 10 of them obviously coming in the red of the Tykes. So, bearing in mind, this is Premier League appearances only. So this is via PremierLeague.com. So you have control of the board, Pete. Now you can take it from here, or you can pass it over to Ian. Your end goal is to get to the end of the board as the winner. Do you want to kick us off, or do you want to pass to Ian?
I'll take it. Yeah, I'm not a coward.
So, Neil Redfern, 84 appearances. Is our next player higher or lower than 84? Ashley Ward.
Higher.
You're correct. Higher. 137 appearances for Norwich, Derby, Barnsley, Bradford and Blackburn. Is our next player higher or lower than 137? Jan Aage Fjortoft.
Lower.
Lower is correct. 84 for Swindon, Middlesbrough and Barnsley. Our next player, Karl-Heinz Riedler.
Lower.
You're correct. Lower. 60 appearances and 11 goals for Liverpool. Unfortunately, some of those did come at Oakwell. Our next player after Karl-Heinz Riedler's 60 is Ariane Dzeu.
Oh, higher.
Higher, 146 appearances, with 27 of them coming for Barnsley before a 5-season hiatus and a return with Portsmouth and Wigan between 2003.
I'm going to lose this at the end, aren't I?
2007.
This is what's going to happen here. Yeah.
You're almost halfway through. This one could be Frank Lampard, higher or lower than 146?
Higher.
It is higher.
Yeah.
600. Yeah, I like how you hesitated.
He's got more goals.
he actually, I think he has higher with 609. He scored his first Premier League goal in his 16th West Ham appearance and played for them almost 150 times before 13 years at Chelsea and a short spell at Manchester City. He remains the 6th top goal scorer in Premier League history at the time of recording and is the only player in the top 20 who is a midfielder. Our next player, Dion Dublin, higher or lower than Frank Lampard's 609?
Yeah, that big injury, didn't it? I'm going to go lower.
It is lower, quite significantly lower. 312 appearances for Manchester United, Coventry and Aston Villa. He scored 111 times. You're 4 from the end, Pete. This could be a perfect run.
It's going to be heartbreaking as well as it is.
Dion Dublin's 312 appearances. Is our next player higher or lower than that? Michael Owen.
It's got to be higher.
It is higher. 326, not as significantly higher as you would think, with appearances for Liverpool.
Real Madrid, didn't he? And
But Liverpool, Manchester United and Stoke. He scored 150 times in that period. After Michael Owen's 326, Samasi Abu.
I don't even know who that is. I'm going to go lower.
It is lower. 22 appearances for the Ivorian-born Frenchman, scoring 5 times for West Ham. 2 of them came against Barnsley, and he assisted twice in that game as well. So both of those assists came in Barnsley as well. So basically, Samasi Abu had 7 goal contributions in 22 games. 4 of them came in the same match. He'd come up against Barnsley again the following season for Ipswich at Portman Road in December 1998. Do you know what happened?
Assist on the goal?
He didn't score. They lost 2-1. I was to set you up for that one. You are 2 from the end now. A reminder, as if you needed it, that if you get it wrong on the end, Ian just walks away with the win here. I mean, Ian's got that pipe out again from his first game at Oakwell. This is remarkable to see. So Samasi Abu's 22 appearances in the Premier League. Is our next player higher or lower? Georgi Christoph.
I think lower.
Georgi Christoph.
I think lower.
Is higher. Georgi Christoph made 23 appearances for Barnsley, almost as many as the notches on his South Yorkshire bedpost, which means that Ian,
how many starts? But it's like 10.
You, there's not many starts. Most of them, I think, were from the bench. So, Ian, it falls to you on the final player. Get this right, you snatch the victory at the end. Get it wrong, Pete takes it. Georgi Christoph made 23 Premier League appearances, but is our next player higher or lower? Danny Wilson. Premier League appearances only. Danny Wilson.
Higher.
You've gone for higher. Pete, just out of interest, what would you have gone for?
I genuinely, it would have been a punt. I couldn't have gone either way. Not sure.
Ian, you've taken the victory at the very end. It is higher. 26 appearances for Sheffield Wednesday in 92-93. He would leave the following season to become player assistant to Viv Anderson at Oakwell before taking up the hot seat himself a year later, and the rest is history. I mean, the thing I love about playing a few rounds of this game now is that it starts out very jovial and it always gets to this point where the tension is unbearable. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Brian. And before I let you go, there's one more person that would have wanted to say hello if she was here. You and I actually briefly met a few years ago at a charity dinner. You were an absolute gentleman. I raced over and said, Brian, my wife was a season ticket holder at Bramall Lane in the 90s. She had your name on her back. She absolutely adored you. Can I get a picture? Because it's rare you can contrast the fantasy life your wife once dreamed of with cold, hard reality. And that is a picture that we hold dear of you and I in a selfie. She was a big fan of you in the 90s. She met you in Meadowhall once, and you and Tony Garner signed her umbrella. I know this is a cameo, but would you be able to just say hello to Lindsay for me?
Hello to Lindsay. Hi, Lindsay. Nice to meet you. Maybe we'll meet again one day.
Fantastic. There you go. That's the Christmas present sorted out.